So tonight is Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the count of the Omer. And it's a very special day for many reasons. To the special energy tonight, which is the energy of unity of Jews, pride of being Jewish, embracing the inner dimension of Torah, because Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, whose passing was on this day, he was the embodiment of the inner dimension of Torah. So it's a very special day to learn the inner dimension of Torah, which is like in Hasidic thought, very special for people that are childless, looking for blessings for children. And in general, from all of the days between Passover and Shavuos, this is the very special, joyous day that a lot of the restrictions that are imposed on the other days from Passover to Shavuos are lifted this day, which is why people get married on this day, people listen to music, people dance. It's a special day. It has a lot of spiritual power. A lot of spiritual blessings come on this day. So it's a good day if you have something you're looking for a blessing for, to try to do something extra and connect to the energy of this day. So everyone can have the blessing they're looking for in their hearts and in their mind. And the learning tonight should help those blessings flow. So what we're going to do is look at ethics of the fathers like we did last week. Remember last week we spoke about these two coordinates of the time, the sphere count, like we're mentioning, and the ethics of the fathers. This coming Shabbos, this coming Sabbath is chapter 5. If you remember, I said there's always 6 weeks between Passover and Shavuos. And each week we study another chapter of ethics of the fathers, which is really giving us ethics, morals, character development, values. As we're working to improve ourselves, which is the purpose of the sphere account, we're also working to improve ourselves through studying these works and ethics of the fathers, to trying to not just read it, but think about these ideas, and through this grow and become people able to, one more time, it's been 3,300 sometimes, but every year we receive it on a deeper and higher level, one more time receive God's Torah. In chapter 5, we're going to start with the 10th Mishnah. This is, the first 5 chapters are Mishnayos, which was the first officially organized writing down of the oral Torah. And they were written in what's called Mishnah, the 6 tractates of Mishnah. And therefore, each one of the statements are called Mishnayos, but we could say statements. So in chapter 5, the 10th statement says, there are 4 character types among men. He who says, what's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. And the sages say, how do you think the sages would define a person who says, what's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine? What type of person do you think they would say he is? Oh, they say he's an ignoramus. They say, oh, that person's an ignoramus. Someone who says what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, well, that's a middle person. But some say that's like a person from Sodom. Sodom, if you remember, the cities that were destroyed in the time of Abraham, because they were so wicked. There were 5 cities, and the main city was Sodom, Sodom and Amorah. So a person that says what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, some say that's person, and some say that's like a person from Sodom. Someone who says what's mine is yours and what's yours and yours is a very pious person. And someone who says what's mine is mine and what's yours is also mine is obviously a very wicked person. So let's think about this for a few minutes, because when the sages are saying this, now there are many deep, mystical, spiritual dimensions. We're just like going on the surface. We're not getting deep. We're not getting mystical. We're not getting spiritual. We're just understanding it in the surface. The sages are teaching us something about people's nature, how man works. They're obviously giving over lessons that they feel valuable for us to understand. So their first perspective was someone who says, what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. And they say, oh, that person's an ignoramus. They don't say he's a bad person or a wicked person, but they don't think it's a very good idea either. They say he's ignorant. Why do you think the sages say someone like that is ignorant?
It sounds like socialist.
Absolutely. I'm waiting. I'm talking to a group of women from Russia. I don't understand how no one's responding. It exactly sounds like socialism. Yes, it does. It does. So what do the sages mean by saying this person is ignorant? What is he ignorant of? This is like socialism. Socialism was not created by Marx. This is, the sages are suggesting this over 1900 some years ago, but they're saying he's ignorant. What do they mean by that?
Because people have it shows no respect for boundaries, for for individual. There's no respect for other people.
So that's interesting. So speaking as someone who was raised in such a society, she said
Yeah.
something I wouldn't have thought of, which is that it's a lack of respect for the individuality and for the boundaries if it's all one common pool. Any other things? But the sages say ignorant, an ignoramus. Why would they qualify such a person as ignoramus? What is he ignorant of?
Why socialism failed? Because they didn't realize that the personal, like a drive to know that I work for something, I treasure something, right? So like it has value. So people have the driver to improve, to how to, how to say
Exactly.
to.
Yep, that's exactly how I would say it. The ignorance here is this isn't a bad person. He's thinking like, this is very idealistic. We're all going to share equally. I'm willing to give you all my stuff. You'll give me all your stuff. I mean, assuming we're all on board and you're agreeing to this. It's a beautiful idea. Our sage is saying, you're an ignorant person. It doesn't work. What are you ignorant of? As Chava's saying, you're ignorant of man's psyche. Now, we're talking in a very benign way. We're not talking about communism and the corruption of socialism. And you might say that also is what the person's ignorant of, that all people are not so idealistic. And if you create such a society, inevitably, like, Animal Farm style, I mean, someone's going to want to have more of the pot that everyone's equally sharing. And that's human nature also. But even if we want to put that on the side and say, no, we're all in this together and we're all committed and we're all idealistic. And like if you think of the kibbutz system in Israel, when the early kibbutzim were socialist models, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? For exactly the reason Chava said. Because God gave us a competitive drive. God gave us the idea of we're striving for something and then we're achieving it. And that striving and that achieving feeds us, gives us the motivation to do more. And if a person knows the harder I work and the more I succeed, the more I could support my family, myself, my values, my interests, this is a drive. And if a person knows it's pointless, you're not going to get anything. The harder you work or the less you work, it's all the same. It's one pot. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. It's all the same pot. It's like, wait, so then what's my value in working? Is working an ethic of value that God approves of? Does God want people to work hard? Or is that like a societal concept that really isn't part of a God philosophy? Any ideas on that?
I think it also strips the person out of his individuality.
Work strips the person of his individuality.
No.
The socialism.
Right.
Yeah. You are right. Chava sort of said that in the beginning, that it's not respecting the individual. And you're saying if what's mine is yours and yours is mine, we're all in this pot together, I lose who I am. And that is true, Ina. That's another reason why it doesn't work and it's not good. But I sort of deviated a bit. But anyone have any thoughts on, do you think from a God model, it is a positive thing to work or a negative thing to work or a neutral thing to work? What did you say, Rivka?
Neutral.
Rivka said it's neutral.
Because
could be bad. Depends how you use it.
if we only concentrate on working and accumulating wealth, that's not what Hashem wants.
Right.
It has to be serving Hashem, serving God. Yes, working, but serving God.
100%. I agree with you, of course, that if the work is driven just to accumulate wealth, like you're saying, that's not a God model. But the concept of working is something that God, I would call it, believes in. It says in Job, Adam Amal Yulad. Man was born to work. Now, there's a lot of different types of work. And we could say, yeah, God, why did you make it so hard? Why are you having me constantly work on myself and you're giving me challenges? Why can't I just coast? I'm your only child. Every one of us is God's only child. Why don't you make it easy for us? And God says, do you not read the verse in Job? Adam la'amal yulad, man was born to work. Meaning God believes in work. Now, I 100% agree with Rivka. If work means working on this external value of just accumulating more and more possessions or money, yeah, you're putting energy in the wrong direction. But the idea of being a worker or a hard worker, that's a value. And when you have this concept of like as Chava was saying, socialism, it strips away that value and it makes it almost like pointless. Of course, as Ina said also, it's removing the individual uniqueness and merit. So in general, the sages are saying, again, about 1900 years before Karl Marx, that this philosophy, even in a very benign form, the person who's thinking of it as ignorant. It's not appropriate for people. It's not creating a society that's healthy for people because it's removing that, as Ina's saying, individuality, as Chava's saying, that drive. It's not something that's very functional. So that's the first concept, where the person's not bad. He's not looking with a bad eye at other people, but he's just ignorant because what he's thinking is a pretty theory. It's not taking into account humans. So you're ignorant of human nature. You're ignorant of how human works. It's not going to work. So we could have told that to Karl Marx or socialism a long time before they started. The second concept the sages said is someone who says, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. I'm not taking something that's yours and I'm not giving you anything that's mine. And some of the sages said, okay, that's like, we're not especially good, especially bad. But other sages said, no, this is a characteristic of the people of Sdom. So if you remember from the Torah portion, Sdom and Amorah and 3 other cities were very, very wicked cities. God destroyed them, destroyed 4 of the 5 in one night. What was their evil? Their evil was in how they treated other people. I mean, they were bad to God as well, but that wasn't what was worthy of destruction at that point in history. Their evil was that they were so selfish that they literally outlawed charity. If someone gave charity, it was a crime. It was actually a capital crime in their society. And they made being mean a virtue. And if someone new came to town, there was all these horrific ways they were trying to harm them and abuse them and steal from them and hurt them in insane ways. And this was a virtue. This was how the society operated. So it's interesting that the sages are saying that a person who says, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours, that's like a characteristic of the people of Sdom, which, as I'm describing to you, were amazingly evil, wicked people. They were so evil and wicked that God did what he's never done since, which is in one night, like, it was like early morning. I say night. It was like between the night and the morning. In one swoop, gone. All 4 cities destroyed. They were that evil. Why do you think the sages will connect a person who says, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours? This is like a characteristic of those horrible, evil people that outlawed charity, that was a capital offense, that had a whole system how to harm any visitor that dared step foot in their town, like layer after layer of things they would do to harm the visitor, very bodily. What's the connection? What do you think the sages are trying to tell us by this?
Exactly how it sounds, that the people become like a stone, no compassion to other people, no like offering help for person in need. It's not a society, it's individual. People have no like a human feelings towards each other.
Right.
No humanity.
Exactly. Ina, what did you say?
I just repeated, sister. No humanity.
No humanity. Exactly. So again, it's an interesting thing because the sages are teaching us in these simple little sentences. They're telling us very important points, very strong points they want us to understand. So what they're saying is, on the surface, this looks okay. What's the person doing wrong? They're not taking from anyone else. They're not stealing. They're not being cruel. They're not harming anyone. They're saying, I work for a living. You work for a living. I've got my money. You got money. I got my possessions. I'll have my lawn or like good fences make good neighbors. Like, what's the person doing wrong? Why are we associating this? And they're saying, like the characteristics of Sdom, but like Chav is saying, and Eve is saying, you have to have humanity. We're not saying you're going to be a very virtuous person if you're somewhat kind and somewhat neighborly and somewhat generous. The next concept, the very righteous person said, what's mine is yours and what's yours is yours. Whoa. It has to be on that level. But at least there has to be a certain amount of compassion, empathy, friendliness, warmth, humanity, right? Ina used the word humanity. There has to be that humanity between people. And if not, walk, 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 walk that road. That's the road to stone. Starting with like that coldness of like, I don't need to give you and you don't need to give me. Like, each man for himself. We're independent. We're self-made men. We're lone ranger. We all can survive ourselves. It also sounds okay. It doesn't sound so bad. Sages say, no. This is the roots. When people live, when society runs this way, this becomes stone-like. This becomes like Sodom. Sodom outlawed charity. It was forbidden. It was a crime. We don't want any paupers in town, so therefore nobody's allowed to give any charity because they don't have paupers. So if you give charity, you're sinning against us. And it was literally a capital offense. They literally killed somebody who gave charity. So that's a very extreme example. True. This is the beginning of the road. That's the end of the road. But the beginning of the road is this sense of like isolationism, emotional isolationism. We don't have to have compassion for an unfortunate person. They should go out and work. I go out and work. They should also go out and work. I work hard to support my family. They could also work hard to support their family. Like that cutting off that natural giving, being nice, being kind, not scrutinizing, well, why do they need my help? Just helping. Again, sages aren't saying this person's amazing and wonderful and very holy. That's just baseline normal. That's normal. Normal is you're a nice person. Normal is you give. Normal is you're kind and compassionate and generous. You want to be very righteous? What's mine is yours. That's very righteous. But normal is being a kind person. Normal is caring for other people, which of course is such a value in Judaism that probably I'm like, not saying anything new here, but the interesting point is how off it is if one doesn't have this basic kindness to others. So these are some thoughts from the 10th Mishnah. If we go to the 12th is talking about learning. And the 12th says there's 4 types of students. Now, in learning, if you're looking at the advantages of a good learner, the sages are basically focusing on 2 advantages. Now, obviously, there are other details, but they're probably all grouped under these 2. One advantage is someone who quickly understands the information, quick to grasp. They got it fast, they got it good. And the other one is retention. They remember what they learned. So sages say, so there are 4 types of students: quick to grasp and quick to forget. Well, he lost his advantage and his disadvantage. Quick to grasp is great, but if you forget quickly, in the end, it's not a good combo. You're not gaining so much. Second type, slow to grasp, but slow to forget. Oh, here your advantage outweighs your disadvantage. It's slow to grasp, it takes you a while, but when you get it, you got it. That's outweighing that it was slow to grasp. The third, quick to grasp and hard to forget. Wow, that's a great combination. And the fourth, slow to grasp and quick to forget. That's a bad combination. That's a bad position. Also here, the sages are bringing out a point. You could say a point about learning, but it's a point they're trying to develop. And I could say as a teacher, I look at it that, I saw this many, many times teaching high school, that you have students that are very smart, very sharp, very fast. And they were all smart, sharp, and fast in elementary school, which means they did very little work because elementary school is fairly easy and they were very smart. And suddenly they come to high school, and high school is, of course, much more challenging, and they fall apart because they don't have the skills of, we'll call it here, retention. They don't have the skills of dealing with something that's bigger than they get it fast, easy. They don't know how to work. They don't have a work ethic in learning. I remember many times speaking to some students that were slow to grasp. They weren't so fast. They weren't so sharp. But because of that, they had a good, strong work ethic. And even in elementary school, they developed tools to deal with studying. And I would tell them, like, you're going to succeed. You're going to succeed because you're going to understand it. You're not going to understand it. You know how to work on it. You know how to handle it. At the end of the day, you're going to be okay. And sometimes people that are smart, but when they're in a situation that they don't handle it, they just fall apart. They don't have the skills. The last point was someone who's slow to understand and forgets easy. And the sage says, that's a bad portion. But what's explained is that's a bad portion doesn't mean you're off the hook. mean, we're talking about studying in the perspective of the sages. What the person is studying is not astronomy, is not medicine. The person is studying Torah. And every Jew should study Torah. And some people have it very easy. They grasp easily, they remember, they got it easy. Beautiful. And some people have it very difficult. They don't understand very well and they don't retain it. That's difficult. But that doesn't remove our obligation to learn Torah and our desire to learn Torah. Because Torah is God's will and wisdom. And when I'm learning Torah, for those moments when I'm learning Torah, like right now we're learning Torah, my mind and God's are one. And when I learn something in Torah and it's in my brain and I carry it with me, I'm carrying a piece of God's will and wisdom in my brain. Imagine the impact of all those little, diamonds of God's will and wisdom in my brain. Imagine how that's affecting me. So the sages, when they're saying, oh, you got a bad portion, yeah, you don't learn too well, you don't remember too well, they're not saying, so go become a tailor. No, they want everyone to learn Torah. They want everyone to learn Torah. I mean, you might also have been a tailor because they did manual trade as they learned Torah, but they want everyone to learn Torah. They want everyone to contain God in their brain. And identifying it as a bad portion doesn't mean, therefore, don't learn. It just means you're going to have to work really hard to overcome this. Because the sages also believe that the mind is a muscle, which means the more you use it, the better it gets. When the Lubavitch Yeshiva was first founded in the 1900s, there was a person there, I'll say this story briefly, it's a long story, but there was a person there who really couldn't learn. He was so sincere, but he really couldn't learn. And he'd come early and he'd spend hours, not much went in. He'd finish late and everybody was like, oh yeah, they sort of felt, he's so sincere, he means so well, but he just doesn't have it. But he kept doing it day after day after day. He came early. He studied all day long. He left late. And over the years, something amazing happened. He became a really good learner. And eventually he became a teacher in this yeshiva, in this rabbinical school of Lubavitch in the 1900s. And he was such an amazing teacher. He was a teacher of Talmud. Talmud's quite difficult. And he was such an amazing teacher that it says people from nearby who didn't learn in this yeshiva, in this rabbinical school, they would come just to hear his classes. And this is the one that everybody was like, oh yeah, feel bad, he doesn't get that he can't learn. So he's just every day acting like he could learn, but he's really not learning. No, he really was learning. And bit by bit, he got better and better. And I've actually saw this with students of mine, and maybe not such a dramatic degree, but that would come to me in ninth grade and they were not very good learners. But they really worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. And 4 years later, mind is a muscle. It was amazing to see the growth. It was so special to see it. That was 12. The 13th Mishnah. The 13th Mishnah is talking about charity. But also here, the sages want us to understand something about human nature. And of course, what they're saying about human nature, we obviously want to try and apply and think about our own human nature. So the first person they say is one who wishes to give, but that others should not. He wants to give charity. He gives charity, but he doesn't want anyone else to give charity. He begrudges others. The second type of person is that others should give and he should not. He begrudges himself. And then, of course, one who wants to give and that others should give, a very pious person, and one who doesn't want to give and doesn't want others to give, a wicked person. Again, we're going to focus on the first two types. I think the last two types are very obvious and understandable. But looking at the first two types, what the sages are saying, one who wants to give, but he doesn't want anyone else to give. Why would a person be like that? You believe in charity, you're giving yourself. Why would you want someone else to give?
That's a big ego.
A big ego.
Yes, he wants to be in the spotlight, so everybody will talk about him, that he is the one.
Exactly.
It's a big, big ego.
A very big ego. He wants to be in the spotlight. He's so generous. He's so beneficent. So he doesn't want anyone else to give because that's going to be sharing the spotlight. Okay. Now, maybe you even know people like this, but I want to think about this in terms of ourselves, because I think the sages are bringing out a very deep, practical point. We're talking here about doing a very good thing. Charity. Charity is a foundational commandment. In the Talmud of Jerusalem, Talmud Yerushalmi, whenever they say the commandment, they mean charity. They don't even have to say the word charity. It's so foundational. It is one of the most significant commandments. So obviously, when we're giving charity, that's a godly act. And our godly soul is involved. We're doing a mitzvah. We're doing a commandment. And I think the sages are bringing out a very strong point that even in our good, our bad can creep in, right? Here you are, you're being generous. I mean, we all work hard for a living, and you're giving from your hard-earned money to other people. That's a very good thing. But I don't want anyone else to give. I want the limelight. I want the praise. I want the acknowledgement. I want the respect. Ego trip. But you're giving charity. That's a good thing. And sometimes we can find in ourselves as well, maybe not as dramatically as this. This is a very dramatic example, but from a dramatic example, we can tone it down and think in terms of our own selves. Sometimes our good and our not as good get blended. It becomes like a mush. I'm motivated to do this because of my good nature, but maybe I'm motivated to do this because of some not good things as well. I mean, in this case, ego, pride, aggrandizement. There could be other situations and other not such good. But I would think the sages are saying this on one level for us to introspect and think like, have I ever been in that situation? Have I ever done something that's as good? I was doing a good thing. I was doing it because it's a good thing. But maybe it wasn't so pure. Maybe other pieces of me were getting in the way. That's this first type we're talking about. The person who wants to give and doesn't want others to give. If we look at the second type, it says, is someone who he wants others to give and he's not giving himself. He doesn't want to give, but he wants others to give. So also here, if you would decontextualize this concept, what is the message? What are the sages saying? What are they saying about human nature? What are they saying that we could apply to look at ourselves? What's going on here? Why does he want others to give, but he doesn't want to give himself?
Can I say something?
Yes, Ina.
Narcissistic personality.
So if he's narcissistic, why would he want others to give?
He wants others to give?
Yeah, this person says he wants others to give, but he's not planning on giving. He's not going to give, where you could say the narcissism, but it says, but he wants others to give.
Well, yeah.
Why would he want others to give?
Because he doesn't want to give.
Oh, so you're thinking of it like, well, there's a need, like the community has to collect funds for whatever. So he's not planning on giving, but he wants everyone else to give because this need has to be met. Okay, that's a thought. I wasn't going in that direction. That makes sense. Any other thoughts on this? Why a person would say, yeah, it's a good idea, give, but he's not giving himself.
There's a saying in English, right? Do as I say.
Not as I do.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes, that's the saying.
So unfortunately, there are types of people, maybe we all have it sometimes in us, that we telling others how they're supposed to behave, but we don't do the same thing, right? Like maybe we know, and it's easy for us to point to others when they don't do it, but it's hard to make ourselves to do the right thing.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. A person who, and again, I feel what Chava is saying is correct. Many of us at some points might have this concept, which is why I think it's good to think about these ideas of like a dissonance between my values and my behaviors. So I understand what Ina was saying, and I'm not saying she's wrong. We're, again, just looking at the very literal, simple meaning of the words, and what she's saying fits the words the same way what I'm saying. So she could also be right, and I'm sure there's room for many levels here. But I was thinking, like Chava was saying, of a person that gets it, philosophically believes charity is a great value. Not that personally I'm going to do it, So it's like what I believe and how I behave can be on two different wavelengths. There's a famous little story with Aristotle that he was once lecturing to his students about a certain very inappropriate behavior, like very not refined, not what a human should do. And he goes off, I guess it's lunchtime, and the students are all into it and they're philosophizing and discussing. And they had this question they couldn't resolve. And they were so excited and into the discussion, they ran after to find Aristotle on his, we'll call it lunch break, to ask him. And they see him and they find him doing exactly what he had just lectured not to do. And they were like, what's going on? And he said, then I was Aristotle the philosopher. Now I'm Aristotle the man. A glib line to cover. Yeah, I philosophically, I got it all right. That doesn't mean I behave that way. That doesn't mean it has to impact my reality. So could be a divide, and it's something worth, like the sages are pointing this out, in terms of our own perspective on ourselves, of course. Is there a divide between my belief system and my behaviors? I'm not going to say hypocrisy, which would be a more extreme concept of mind and actions not jiving, but even in a subtle, nuanced way, we could have a vision of what's appropriate. We could believe in that vision. We could tell others to follow that vision, but that doesn't necessarily automatically mean, and therefore I'm doing the same. No, there's the work of me living by my vision as well. And the fact that it's so clear in my vision and have it so down pat and I even can tell others about it, it doesn't mean I've arrived. I have to do the work that my behaviors are in sync with my vision as well. That was 13. 14 talks about 4 types who attend the house of study. Okay, so it used to be, even is now to a certain degree, the idea of, again, what are we supposed to be doing? Studying Torah. What's our life supposed to be about? Studying Torah. So that doesn't mean that people had the luxury of studying Torah all day long. As I said, there are the cobblers and the shoemakers and the tailors and the blacksmiths and whatever else, the farmers. But then after they finish their day's work, they go study Torah. It says a Jew has to study at least every evening, every morning, at least twice a day. Every man should be studying Torah. God ideally wants all of us to study Torah all the time, right? For the 40 years when the Jews were in the desert and we didn't have to work for a living, what were we doing for 40 years? The men didn't have to go out to work and the women didn't have to cook and clean and mend and shop. And so it was a generation that would study Torah. So at least it should be part of our life to study Torah. So the sages are talking about 4 different types going to the house of study. So the first type is the one who goes to the house of study, but doesn't study. And it's interesting. What do you think the sages would say? Of course, the sages are expressing God's view here. Someone who trots off to the house of study, he drinks the coffee, maybe he eats the danishes, maybe he sits on the side and quietly talks with a friend. He's not studying. What do you think the sages would say about such a person?
He's misrepresenting himself.
Oh, that's interesting. He's misrepresenting himself. He's going off to study, but he's not studying.
He has a good intention.
He has a good intention. Chava's being very generous. Every night he thinks tonight's going to be the night. It just never happens. Good. Any other ideas? Regularly goes to the house of study and does not study.
He's lazy.
He's lazy. Oh, Ina's like, he's lazy. Anyone else? So Rivka said misrepresentation. Chava said good intentions. Ina said lazy. And the sages say he gets the reward for going. The next person is the opposite situation. He does not go to the house of study. He studies. He learns at home, but he doesn't go to the house of study. And the sages say, oh, he gets the reward for studying, but not the reward for going because he doesn't go. And then, of course, there's the person who goes and studies. Great. Check, check. Got both rewards. And the person who doesn't go and doesn't study, nothing. Again, I want to focus on the first 2. I thought in both of the first 2, the sages were saying something very interesting for us to think about. So in the first one, the person is going to the house of study. He's not a learner. I have a number of children like this. They're not cares? They're going to the house of study. They're not studying. I know exactly what they're doing. They're drinking the coffee. They're eating the Danishes. They're talking. They're not studying. Why do they deserve any reward? Rivka said misrepresentation. Ina said lazy. I was more charitable. She said, well, no, maybe every night they really think this is going to be the night they're going to study. Well, let's say that. They know they're not studying, but they're going. And the sages are saying God's vision on this. They're getting the reward for going. Why would there be any reward here when they're going to the house of study and not studying? What do you think? What's the point the sages are making?
They could go to a different place that is much less holy.
Okay, that's one thought. Chava said, well, God appreciates that they're not going to a bar. So instead of the bar, they're going to the house of study. God appreciates that. Good. Any other thoughts? I was thinking even more than Chava, along those lines, but even more positive. Any other
They will
thoughts?
study eventually. They will be
Okay.
going, but then at some point they will study.
So that's a very nice idea what Fag is saying, that God trusts us. He says, okay, you're young, you're not interested, it's hard for you to study. But if you keep putting yourself in a good situation, eventually you might open up a book and you might find it interesting. You might overhear two people learning and it's interesting and you join in. So when you keep opening up the door, like in terms of ourselves, if we ask ourselves every day to pray, right? Or to say Psalms, or to go to a class. And it's like, I'm not into it when I pray. It's meaningless. I'm just rushing through the words. I'm not into it when I say Psalms. Ditto, meaningless, rushing through the words. I'm not really paying attention when I'm in the class. I'm distracted. I'm not enjoying it. I say, keep doing it. Why do you keep doing it? Why should I do something that's not working for me? Because if you keep doing it, it might someday work for you. If you stop doing it because it's not working for you, you never have the opportunity for it to work for you. So what Fag is saying, I think, is a very true point. If you keep going to the house of study, not even as Chava originally charitably said that you have the good intention, but even with the good intention, you keep going there. Someday you might start studying. And similarly in our life, when we keep doing things that seemingly, the goal is, and I'm not achieving that goal and it's not working for me, keep putting yourself in that good space. That's the only way it ever can work for you, is if you keep giving yourself the opportunity. I would say something else. I know it's a little late, but I think this is an important point. So something else I think valuable here is the idea that it's really important and valued by God for us to put ourselves in good situations. Let's call it in good company. Studying. But if you every night go and hang out with the studiers, the ones that are doing the right thing, not in the bars, not in your house, but you're going to the place where everyone else is studying, you know what? That's a good thing. God says, I'm giving a reward for that. I want to encourage that. I like that behavior because it's important for a person to put themselves in a healthy, good society. Like the vibe, the perspective is going to rub off. So Fega said, you're going to start studying, which is beautiful. And I could see that happening. But even if you don't start studying, if you keep going to the house of study, your headspace is going to be in good spaces because you're going to be surrounded by people that are doing the right thing. That's going to rub off on you. So even if a person isn't like 100% there, like if you could take a student and say, well, should I put them in this school? I mean, they're not like that. They're not holding there. It's a good school with lots of people that are very, into doing the right thing. They're not really there. If you could get them into that school and some of the school would accept them, it's a great idea. Why is it a great idea? They're not like that. Yeah, but that's how they become like that. When you hang out with people that are in a good space and doing good things, this helps you be in a good space and doing good things. So even if you're not going to be studying, I can't reward you for studying. God says you didn't study, but I can reward you for going to the house of study because I like that. It's going to help you be a better person, a person like the people who are sitting and studying. I think it's also very interesting. The next clause, the person who doesn't go to the house of study, studies, is rewarded for the studying. Can't be rewarded if you didn't go to the house of study. But we are not going to talk about that now. We will stop at this point. Thank you so much.